The mystique and wonders surrounding Grand Seiko has arisen as a byproduct of their timeless artistry combined with their trailblazing innovations. Contributing to all of this are terms such as spring drive, Zaratsu, 9F, terms that we've heard of before. But what do they entail? And more importantly, how is it all done? Today we bring you along for our exclusive tour of Grand Seiko's Shinshu Watch Studio. Before we kick off our tour with Grand Seiko's brand curator, Joe Kirk, we are given a brief welcome to the studio by Mr. Ueda of the brand. So we're inside the Shinshu Watch Studio, and I am absolutely honored to be here. Thank you for having us. I am looking forward to being able to walk through, see what we have in store for us today. So thank you so much for having us here.
Yeah, you are welcome. Shinshu Watch Studio has over 80 years watchmaking history, and we have almost all functions like R&D and design and manufacturing under one roof. And here is the birthplace of spring drive and 9F Quartz exclusively for Grand Seiko.
Yeah, since the genesis of this brand, this has been an important site for Grand Seiko and just allowing it to move forward with its innovation. So very much looking forward to it, and thank you again for having us.
You please enjoy. We welcome always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm here with Joe Kirk inside of Shinshu Watch Studio. Joe, great to see you as always.
Oh, it's very much my pleasure.
So I would like to first establish where we're at currently. So could you give us some more information about the work that is done here before we start to walk through and do our tour?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now we're at Seiko Epson in Shiojiri in Nagano Prefecture, which is home of the Shinshu Watch Studio, which is comprised of our Takumi studio, our case and jewelry studio, and of course the micro artist studio. We're going to do a walkthrough of course, assembly and adjustment, which is very important. We have the Zaratsu polishing case studio, which is going to give you a really good idea of all the complexity and handwork that goes into our cases. You're going to see dial manufacturing, the cutting of the indices, and even tempering of hands. And we'll even pop into the micro artist studio, which is really exciting, of course.
And a little bit more specifically too, the region that we are in and understanding Grand Seiko and its genesis is also important too.
Yeah, the Shinshu region of Japan is where actually Grand Seiko was born in 1960. So it's a very important part of our brand heritage, but also on top of that, the manufacturing and development of all the abilities that we have under one roof here started even back in the 40s, so long before Grand Seiko began. So we have a lot of great elements and a lot of history in this region of Japan.
So we have a lot of walking to do, a lot to see. Yeah. So let's get going with the tour if we can.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Do it. All right, Joe. Well, first studio of many. Where are we at?
All right, so this is the Takumi studio. So these are the craftsmen and women that are in charge of Grand Seiko assembly. So everything from 9F Quartz to 9R spring drive is assembled in this studio, and we're going to be able to actually go in and see firsthand.
So as we're about to do this, one question I would have is, been fortunate to see a lot of mechanical watchmaking assembly process. Yeah, what is specifically different as you're looking at spring drive, 9F, but probably specifically spring drive with the assembly process? What other considerations are made or is different as you're going in here?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of similarities between assembling a conventional mechanical watch compared to spring drive, but there's a lot of different points as well.
Of course.
So it takes a lot of skill, dexterity, and patience, which I have very little of, as you may know.
That's why I have my job.
But in the end, there's a lot of different elements, like setting the glide wheel as an example, as opposed to a balance wheel. These are two very different processes and take different, let's say, training that you have to hone in on to develop your skill further. So the other elements of assembly with spring drive is, if you don't set the wheels and gears perfectly, any little inefficiency in transmission of energy can equate to a problem, or it would not transfer energy appropriately because it has to be very efficient in order for spring drive to work. That's one of the reasons it was such a challenge to develop in the first place. So with that, on top of that, this is why we have this clean room, is that they have to be very thorough and make sure that there's absolutely no dust, and because that could also impede the operation of spring drive. So here we have a craftsman assembling, this is our caliber 9R A2, which is, spring drive is pretty amazing no matter what caliber you're looking at, but 9R82 is one of the new evolutions in technology for Grand Seiko. So you can also see this new integrated circuit that we developed, right? The package IC that we use in spring drive. So this, for the first time, enables basically temperature compensation in spring drive, allowing it to achieve an ultra-high accuracy, so exceeding the previous spring drive, like 9R65 as an example.
So with that, you have mainspring, which is going to allow that longer reserve here compared to a 9R65. And then in addition to that, we were talking about temperature compensation, what's happening there is going to also make it more accurate, almost twice as accurate as a conventional 9R65.
Absolutely.
So incredible.
So another impressive point of caliber 9R82 and A5 is the finishing level, right? And 9R65 in that series, 9R86, kind of the more familiar spring drive movements are beautifully finished as well with the line gradation stripes, beautiful beveling. But with 9R82 and A5, we've developed the new Shinshu frost finish, which I'm sure everyone loves. This, beautiful frosted finish representing the snow and frost, the hoarfrost that grows on trees in the Shinshu region of Japan. As you have experienced, it gets a little cold here.
I have seen it now. Yes.
So another thing too is that this finish is actually a bit more delicate to handle. So the skill level that's required needs to be very high in order to assemble them without doing any damage, let's say. So that's one of the prides of this new movement is this finish, and it would be a shame to ruin it. So other elements are rounded beveled edges, which you don't conventionally see in something in the $10,000 price range, which most of the 9R82 and A5 calibers are.
Which I would say also is really elevated, especially with the contrasting of the different surface finishes on the movement itself. You really see those polishing really pop out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I'd say one of the other great benefits too is the power reserve indicator on the back on caliber 9R82 with the tempered blue hand. So a lot of great features on this evolutionary caliber, let's say, but at the same time, the skill set is really everything for assembly. Most of spring drive movements, if not all, have over 200 components at the starting level. So, and goes up from there.
Yeah, that's more components than a combustion engine for a vehicle that we drive around in, so just to give some context.
So we're also looking at 9F assembly, and 9F Quartz is one of the pillars of Grand Seiko, and I think a lot of people may shun Quartz away, but at the end of the day, this is as complex as many mechanical movements in the industry. Over 100 components that are all hand assembled, and it's beautifully finished. But also on top of that, the engineering is amazing. So what we're seeing right now is actually the hairspring adjustment that's used, and very odd, I know.
It's a hairspring quartz watch, not something you see every day.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not used as you would find in a conventional mechanical watch. It's actually used to absorb the backlash of the second hand as it ticks forward. So there's a lot of complexities of 9F, and I think that once people do a little research, they become obsessed.
Yeah, you see, the work that's done to this. I mean, this is not just a standard assembly of a quartz movement. These are trained artisans that are able to do this, and the performance on the other side, plus or minus 10 seconds a year. I mean, this is industry-leading stuff that you're getting here.
Yeah, I mean, it runs for 3 years. It has insane level of accuracy. It's always ready to go. Set it and forget it, right? It's very practical, and that's why it's a perfect fit for Grand Seiko.
So from spring drive, one point of fascination for collectors, to another, dial making.
Yes. So now we're at our dial studio, and you get to see how we kind of bring the nature of time to life. And so this is a very delicate process. Most of our dials are made by press patterning. So we have these very unique textures, many of them very organic and sporadic, let's say. So some of those patterns we can actually create by press, so we keep them consistent. But sometimes there's hand carving or various tools used by hand in order to create the various textures in the mold and then press them into the dial.
So you're getting that element of hand finish by an individual artisan, but also being able to do it at some additional scale.
Yeah, and the key is consistency. Yes. Absolutely. We want every dial to look the same, just as awesome from one to the next.
And there's also all these dials. There's always like this balance of perfection in the imperfect, which I really love, and you can kind of see that with a lot of like the texture and going on here. Also indices as well, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so basically what's going on in the dial studio at the moment, at least what we're seeing on the screen here, is setting of the indices. So our very highly complex indices that have many facets, right? Mirror surfaces on most, if not their hairline finished. So those, you have to be very careful to retain the high quality finish. They use a special set of tweezers, and each indice is set by hand into the dial using 2 feet or posts that go into a very tiny hole on the dial, and if the dial is dark, it's almost impossible to see.
Yeah.
So then from there, it's attached 2 ways, one by press and then the other by adhesive. So that way, no matter what, those indices are not coming off of the dial. So they actually do drop tests as well to ensure that the indices are attached properly.
So we talk a lot about this dial texture, but I think a key part of the formula is also just the heavy faceting that you're going to see on both the hands as well as the indices. Can you explain a little bit more how that actually is done?
Of course, yeah. So basically, we have a drum for the indexes as a perfect example. So the indexes are placed one by one on the drum, and then from there, individually, each surface is individually cut by a diamond cutting tool. So this enables the perfectly flat, sharp, and beveled edge on all of the surfaces on Grand Seiko's very complex indices. And so after the first surface is cut, and sometimes there's several surfaces that need to be cut, they fix to the next position and cut the surface again. So this is how you get these really sharp and complex facets.
So Joe, this is very satisfying to watch in action. Can you explain what is going on here?
So right now we're printing the logos as well as the minute track for the dials on the Hana Ikara SPGA 413. So basically what you're seeing is this metal plate here has a recessed area with the logo and the minute track, and she's applying ink into the recessed area, and then this gelatin pad comes down, picks up the ink, and then places it on the dial. And one of the most fascinating things about this process is, we're a vertically integrated manufacturer in many, many ways. We make virtually every component in-house. That includes the gelatin pad itself.
Another point I'd like to talk about a bit more is bluing and tempering. It's because when we see the color, that's one thing, but further, this is also helping with the resilience of the material itself. So can you talk about that as well?
Yeah, so when you look at a Grand Seiko and it has a cobalt blue second hand or GMT hand or even sometimes a power reserve hand, this is done solely by tempering or heating, right, till it forms an oxide film, which creates the blue color. But it's a very delicate process. You have to know what you're doing, and you have to know the perfect shade of blue strictly by sight. So our craftsman individually, one by one, tempers each hand in order to create a consistent but perfectly even and blued second hand or GMT hand. So it's really unbelievable, especially at the price range of Grand Seiko, that each hand is blued individually.
And they have that almost clock in their brain to know exactly when they've just had this experience to be able to know exactly when to pull it off. Because if you don't do this at the right time, that color will change as well. You see it's brown or
uneven.
Yes.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that could go wrong.
Yes.
So it takes a lot of skill and training. So now we're at the case studio, and this is where all the magic happens to create that beautiful distortion-free mirror finish you find on Grand Seiko through what we call Zaratsu polishing. So a little bit behind the scenes before we get into the Zaratsu process, to make our cases, we have a couple different methods that we'll use or adapt to. And so we can either make our cases by cold forging, which is basically compressing the metal at room temperature, or we can do the CNC milling process. So after that, we can bring it in for its famous Zaratsu polishing.
Polishing is not something that is exclusive to Grand Seiko, but Zaratsu polishing, it's of course become this almost so celebrated idea about what Grand Seiko is. What makes it so distinct? How would you describe that to somebody that hears this term Zaratsu for the first time and that technique?
There's really a lot to say about Zaratsu, so it's very difficult for me to convey it in kind of a condensed format. But realistically, I think what a lot of people don't realize, is that it's not just about the distortion-free mirror finish. We're actually utilizing Zaratsu polishing to actually create the final form of the cases. So when you look at Grand Seiko, it's a very geometric shape, right?
Sure.
A lot of flat surfaces, sharp edges, and beautiful intersecting planes. And the case really plays off light and shadow, which is based on the Japanese sense of aesthetic, right? So this beauty of Grand Seiko, which really was introduced to the design through the 44GS in 1967. This is how we look at all of our cases now. How do they play with light? How are they complex in shape? And what are we going to do to continue to evolve that? So Zaratsu is different in regular buffing, let's say, or conventional polishing, right? Where you're using a buffing wheel, which is typically like a soft cotton type material.
Yes.
So Zaratsu is not. We do use buffing in some of our processes, of course, but with Zaratsu, it's actually a metal disc with an abrasive sheet that is essentially grinding the surface to create that flat, and then also by creating this ultra flat surface on these multiple planes, you can bring it to a sharp point, and that's how you get these really sharp angles on Grand Seiko cases.
So hard surface on hard surface, and even the motion as well to get that. One thing I was recognizing with the Zaratsu polishing versus if you see a traditional polishing wheel is even the motion of going back and forth from a traditional polishing wheel. This is more of a back and forth, adding the pressure on this disc that is spinning, and you're able to get that distortion-free finish because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the beauty of Grand Seiko cases too is kind of the emotional value, because everyone is done by hand. So Zaratsu cannot be done by machine, and that's bringing those hands together to create your Grand Seiko is a part of the beauty of the brand.
Are there challenges with specific cases that you hear, like a 62GS versus a 44GS, that are like some of these specific polishing elements that are more difficult than others?
Of course. So with our cases, it's not just the case shape, so it varies by design, but also the material. So we have stainless steel, we have high intensity titanium, we have gold and platinum in some of our watches, of course. So each one is increasingly more and more complex and time consuming to finish. So the other element is when you look at a Grand Seiko case and you see this beautiful hairline finish, which they call sujime in the factory, this is something that actually has to be Zaratsu polished first, and then the hairline is applied by hand. So all of the elements of Grand Seiko cases are Zaratsu polished first, and then we apply the hairline finishing after.
So it's been a very eventful day so far, Joe, but we are going to save something very special for last.
Indeed. So we're here now at the legendary Micro Artist Studio. So I'm sure you know very well, but this is where the handcraft, the meticulous handcraft of convex beveled edges, hairline finishing on the bridges, and the spring drive technology all merged together. So this studio was created in 2000 to basically preserve handcraft within the company. And the meticulous nature of the artisans in this studio has really brought their recognition to the next level.
Talking about the artisans here, what does training look like for them? And where are they in the grand mix of things in terms of their skill level? I mean, these are the best of the best the company has to offer in many ways in terms of these specific crafts, correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's they vary in skill sets. So it's a very small team. Mm-hmm. So there's different tasks, let's say, that are done by different people. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to assembly, we definitely want to introduce you to someone very special.
Hi. マイクロアーチ工房で QR02 の企画や生産が始まる頃に社内で組み立て者を探している時前の職場の匠工房に行って 7R88 や QR65、QR86 などのスプリングドライブの組み立てはアッセンブル作業を経験していたためマイクロアーチ工房へ配属となりました。マイクロアーチ工房の配属後、アッセンブル作業では石やピンの形や大きさに合わせた最適な道具の選び方を熟練技能者に教えていただき、繰り返しトレーニングをしました。組み立て作業でも分解組み立てを繰り返し行い、組み立ての3つの基本である注油、あがき、ねじ締めの最適量を繰り返し訓練を行いました。アッセンブルや組み立てを行う上で部品に傷や汚れをつけずに作業をする点では量産品も同じ点ですが 手仕上げした部品は取り扱いがより繊細で気を使います。マイクロアステ工房での仕事の好きなところは、アッセンブル作業では地板や受けの石やピンを打つときに手に伝わる感覚と音、組み立て作業ではゼンマイを手で巻き上げる時の感覚が好きです。
So far, we've had a view into a variety of Grand Seiko's skilled expertise, from the likes of their case polishing, dial finishing, their fine crafts within their micro artist studio, and of course, spring drive assembly. Speaking of spring drive, to connect the dots of its development, we speak to a gentleman who has had a front row seat in its evolution over the last few decades.
平谷栄一と申します。私は1992年にこのセイコーエプソンに入社しました。それから一貫してムーブメント設計を担当しております。2000年からはスプリングドライブの設計を行っております。今までに携わったグランドセイコー専用キャリバーとしましては、2004年 QR65、2007年に QR86 のクロノグラフ、2010年には QR15、2015年シースルーバック仕様の QF82、最近2020年には QRA 系のキャリバーを開発する担当を行っております。まずグランドセイコー初のスプリングドライブであるキャリバー QR6 系ですが、開発当初はグランドセイコーに入れるためのスペックとして、まず一つが72時間持続、もう一つが高精度の日差プラマ1秒相当で、3つ目がですね、巻き上がる自動巻き機構、これが必須であると定めて初めてその開発を行いました。またスプリングドライブの7R 系からは約5年の歳月をかけて開発をしております。その際のムーブメント開発の思想におきましては、初めてプラットフォーム思考設計というものを取り入れまして、キャリバー QR6 系をベースとしてゆくゆくの派生展開は GMT やコ秒、また最後にはクロノグラフというところまで一貫して開発できるようなものを取り組んでおります。ある意味このスプリングドライブクロノグラフを最終形態とするベースキャリバーが QR6 系であったというようなところが開発の思想としたと言えます。スプリングドライブの開発についてはこの QR6 系の一連の開発で第一段階については一旦落ち着きましたが、2015年ぐらいからこの薄型化というようなものが原点回帰ということで始まりました。で我々もQR6 系については若干厚いというふうに思っておりましたので、そこについては次の開発については薄型のキャリバーを作りたいというような思いから2017年頃からキャリバー QRA 系の開発に取り組んでおります。ただ取り組むだけではなく薄型化だけではなくてスペック的なところも全て上回りたい、また魅力度向上や利便性向上みたいなものも目指しまして、まずは持続については5日持続、あと日産についてはさらに高精度のプラマイ1秒、プラマイ 0.5 秒で薄型化、さらにはこの開発の地である信州の魅力を入れ込んだムーブメント外観というようなところを特徴に開発を進めております。スプリングドライブにおいてはゼンマイ駆動でありながら姿勢差などに影響されない精度を持っておりますので、今後につきましてもさらなる向上を目指しまして開発を進めてグランドセイコーの成長をさらに強力に後押ししていきたいというふうに考えております。スプリングドライブについては我々の先輩である設計者が考案しまして、それを20数年根気よく開発を進めてようやく実現できた結晶になります。我々も自信を持ってお客様に届けられるようにその後も改良改善を重ねてそのような評価をいただき非常に光栄と思っております。スプリングドライブにおいてはまずメカニカルな部分技術、またクォーツの時計で養ったエレクトロニクスの技術、またコイルの発電の技術と、この3つがあったからこそなった商品化になります。このような技術を持っているブランドというのは非常に稀で我々にしかできない技術だと思っております。このオンリーワンの技術こそが我々の強みであり、またこれがスプリングドライブというユニークなものづくり開発につながったと思っております。それは我々エンジニアの夢が形になった結晶ですので、 このスプリングドライブを世界に誇れる日本の良い時計というふうに思っておりますので、グランドセイコー、このスプリングドライブ、これがですね、日本人の感性を腕に乗せて人生を共に歩んでいただけたらというふうに思っています。